Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. Unfortunately, I'm still coming to you from a house that's beat up and worked on, and I have no electricity in here, no computer working, so I'm recording from a phone without a mic. So this is unfortunate, but I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato, and today we're here to talk about Giants rumors hot and heavy, and a little bit about what that rumor is for. So, we saw a lot. It's kind of crazy, Nick. I feel like the smoke around this team from a rumor standpoint and from a report standpoint about what they're going to do is insane compared to other teams. I don't see this for everything. I don't see this happen for the Titans or the Jets or all these teams that are in the mix for a new quarterback. But the Giants and their quarterback fever that we've discussed for the last 2-3 weeks, or for us the years, is really reaching a breaking point, it seems. And I am a little concerned, Nick, because it does remind me a little bit of last year when I was convinced by a source that the Giants and Patriots had a deal in place and they were trading up to 3. And there was a lot of reports around that. And it seemed like a lock that they were going to trade to 3 and get Drake May. And then it all fell apart and that trade never happened. So we'll see. I don't want to count my chickens. I'm just going to wait it out this year. But the reports that are coming in from 3 sources, one from Jordan Ronan, one from a Tennessee Titans beat writer, I believe, Nick. I don't have him in front of me. And then from Big Blue Interactive Asshats, as they call them, the people who have reported some news before. It's hot and heavy. And
Asshats, I love that.
It seems likely at this point that the Giants, according to these reports at least, have a deal in place or working on a deal to trade up with the Tennessee Titans to number 1 overall. And according to Ronan's report from today, Nick, we're recording this on a Tuesday, March 4th or 5th, whatever it may be, the Giants will be trading up to select Cam Ward and not Shadur Sanders, quarterback from Miami Hurricanes. So a lot to talk about. One more thing, finally. Oh, yeah, forgot. The report, according to these reports, the price will be significant to trade up. There has been discussions that started on 2 3s, and they've only gone up from there. That's like, when you do a trade talk with your buddies in fantasy, Nick, and you're like, I'll give you this and this. And it's a starting point, and then the trade, ultimately ends up being a lot more. Well, from what I've heard, according to the Tennessee Titans reporter, the trade would be a 3 this year, next year's 2, and a swap of Kavon Thibodeaux for Harold Landry. Now, that's the part that gets really interesting. So there's a lot to unpack here, Nick. I don't know where you want to start. From the Kavon standpoint, do you want to start from who they'd be trading up for Cam Ward? Where are you at with all of this?
Let's start actually with this.
Okay.
So there's reportedly a deal in place, right? How much of that is contingent on the Giants landing or not landing Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson? How much of free agency influences this, or do you think that they are completely separate and independent of each other?
It's a great question. I think because if they landed Stafford, would the answer be different? I don't know. And is part of this idea that they have this trade in place or they're working on this trade because they feel that they missed on Stafford and that was their other plan to get somebody and help them win now. I don't know that because I still feel like they're on different timelines. Matthew Stafford and Cam Ward, as much as I like some of the things I've seen on tape from Ward, I'm not sold, and I know you are too, that he just comes right in and plays elite level football. And I think that would go for any quarterback you can draft in any draft class. And I think, I've said it before, but I would most likely have Cam Ward as my quarterback 4 if we combine this year's class and last year's class. I don't see it changing much from watching. I've watched 6 games on tape. I'm going to watch more, but I don't personally foresee that getting any different. And some people would have him 5 behind McCarthy. I like enough of what I've seen from Ward that and from what I like in quarterbacks that I would put him 4 above McCarthy, but behind the 3 from last year. So for me, that's not necessarily a quarterback that I know is definitely going to come in right away, because I didn't even know if Drake May would come in right away and look good, or Jaden Daniels, or any of those guys. So I don't know the timeline, Nick. I do want to live in a world, though, where they can sign Rodgers and still trade up and draft one of these quarterbacks, because I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea for one of these quarterbacks to spend a year learning from behind Rodgers.
So that means if that were to happen, let's operate in that world. Giants sign Aaron Rodgers and they trade up. So we're looking at parting ways with, you said, a 3.
Well, this is a report. I don't think this is real.
No,
I don't
know.
I
know. But I want to operate in this world. I still think it's valuable. So it would be a 3, a 2, and Kavon for Harold Landry.
Next year's 2 or next year's 3, I believe. And Kavon swap for Harold Landry.
We would keep 34.
Yes.
And part ways with 65. Because the Titans right now have they have the first, the 35th, the 102nd, 119th pick. So they would get 65th. They would get a third round pick since they do not have a third round pick right now. And they get compensation next year. Much younger player with Kavon, and Shane Bowen gets reunited with Harold Landry, who's like, what, 4.5 years older than Kavon Thibodeaux, something like that. Harold Landry's still a talented player. I think he fits the system maybe better than what Kavon Thibodeaux did. I like the idea of Harold Landry with Brian Burns. But regardless of all that, then you get Cam Ward in the building. Look, man, I don't want to part ways with too much compensation, but I am 5 games into Cam Ward, and I'm a fan. I like Cam Ward a lot. We are going to be talking a lot about Cam Ward in the coming weeks, man. I love his ability to extend plays. I love the creative aspect of his game. I think he can operate in rhythm from a timing West Coast type of system. Whenever the Miami did run plays like that, he looked fine operating that, even though a lot of the times he is just running around like with the chicken with his head cut off, like making plays. Those are the ones that really attract your attention and catch your eye. He has the arm talent to throw vertically, intermediate, shallow. So there's a lot, and he's tough. He's stronger than he looks. He's running through arm tackles and things of that. And there's a lot that I liked when I saw the 5 games that I've seen of Cam Ward. I still got like 2 or 3 more I'm going to watch, and then I'll come out with my full evaluation over at Giants Country, Patricia Traina's site. If anybody wants to go and check that out, that should be soon. But do I sign off on this? Look, I think I could be talked into it if that's just the compensation, right? I don't think that's too much. It's like, are we going to part ways with the next year's 1? That's where I'm like, no. 34, I'm like, I really don't want to part ways with 34 either, especially when you look at the reality that is the New York Giants had this pick locked up. But if you're just talking about a 3 and maybe next year's 2, and then Kavon, it's not ideal, but if that's how you're going to get your possible franchise quarterback, and if that's what you're looking for, I can be talked into it. What about you?
I think we have to look at it in a lot of ways. I think the first thing is, as hard as it is for us to do, Nick, and I know it's difficult for both of us just listening to what you just said and knowing my feelings on it, we can't anymore look at this. It's a spill. What's it? The sunk cost fallacy, Paul. Sunk cost fallacy, right? Yeah. Yeah, we could have had him for free and we wouldn't have had to do this, but that's in the past and we can't afford that. So we have to just look at it like that. We never had a chance to do that. I think that's the healthiest way to look at it.
That's the healthiest way, but it's still one of those things that will always just be sitting there. Like, remember this?
Right.
You know, that like dark thing that's just sitting over you. It's just like, yo,
of course, dude.
You sit there and you ruminate on it and you just want to bash your head against the computer screen. Sorry.
Yeah, I like it. But so now it becomes a matter of, is that compensation that we would feel comfortable with trading up for a player like Cam Ward? And so do you have any feel on that? Like, is he a player that because to me, there's a difference between drafting a player at 1 or 3 and actually trading a lot of assets to get that player.
Yeah. So I think he's on the fringes of it. I think he's in the conversation at least. Right. And there are times where there are players that I didn't think were in that conversation in the past when it comes to trading up for them. Because you're right. Like, I'm 5 games in. I think I would have him above JJ. I'm not like certain about it because I did like JJ McCarthy. They're different types of players. And I think JJ also played well out of structure, and he could play very well within Michigan's offense as well. I did like JJ McCarthy. I just preferred Malik Neighbors and like a possible top 5 talent at wide receiver to JJ McCarthy. Cam Ward he's at least in the, there's at least an argument to say that I would have had him higher if he was in last year's class, based on the tape that I've seen from the University of Miami. So I think I think he's in the conversation is how I would answer that, even though that was long-winded.
No, I get what you're saying. And I think I'm kind of at that point now where I see enough upside in Cam Ward that he's a player I'd be willing to take the risk on of trading assets. Now, what are those assets? It's a question, because I don't want to be the team that just gets duped because we're in this desperation mode, right? Like, I need Joe Schoen to understand the actual leverage that is available to him and available to the Titans. Where do we stand in these talks? Well, I want to start by saying this, Nick. The Titans do not want to move that far down. If they're going to make this trade, there are not that many teams the Giants are competing with for this trade. They want one of these blue chips. He said it multiple times, Berganzi, whatever his name is, the Titans.
Yep.
He said, I think there's some blue chips in this draft, and he said the word generational talents in this draft, and I don't want to miss on them. Well, what does that say to you and me, Nick, when we look at this draft class? It says he's probably talking about Travis Hunter, and he's probably talking about Abdul Carter. If he makes a trade from 1 to 3, he guarantees himself one of those 2 players. If he makes a trade anywhere else, he doesn't guarantee himself one of those two players. Now, does he have a third generational talent in his mind? Maybe. So maybe he'll be willing to go to 4. Who's at 4? The team that's 4 is not looking to trade up to 1. The only other place he's going to go is with the Raiders or with the Jets. And in both scenarios, he's not getting a generational player. So really, it comes down to this. Are you willing to potentially call his bluff if you're Joe Schoen? Are you willing to say, guess what, Berganzi? I understand that we can look at past trades made in the NFL draft. What did the Bears trade with the 49ers to move up and get Mitchell Trubisky and go from 3 to 2? Blah, blah, blah. What did this team trade with this and say, you have to give us all this? Or you could look at it like, no, we say no. And let's see what happens. Are you going to sit there at 1, or are you going to take the assets that we're willing to give you? Because if you're the Titans, you're better off taking the assets than not taking the assets. Because your other option is you're going to take a player at 1 of those 2 players. Ward's going to go 2 to the Browns, right? The other thought is, Nick, do the Browns love Ward enough to be willing to trade up with you to go from 2 to 1? Because that's your other trade partner. But in that scenario, Nick, you're not going to get as much trade compensation from the Browns to the Giants because you're going from 2 to 1 instead of 3 to 1. So regardless, the Giants are still in a better position.
Yes, the Giants, I mean, honestly, with as shitty as the last year, well, last like 2 years have been for the New York Giants, they are in a position that if somebody does draft Cam Ward before them, they will get one of those blue chippers if they want to, if they don't trade out, right? So that is, I guess, a glass half full way to look at this entire situation. Now, it's not ideal to trade up, right? But that could be the situation that manifests. That could be the situation that unfolds as the Giants, like as we're talking about, trade up, and then they get Cam Ward. If I'm the Tennessee Titans, why don't I take Cam Ward? Because I don't have a quarterback long-term either. And that's something else. Like, they benched Will Levis, who they spent a second-round pick on 2 years ago. They benched him for Mason Rudolph, who's going to be a free agent this year. And I don't think I'm hearing enough of why doesn't Tennessee just stay put and take Cam Ward? That could just be like a media thing, because this draft isn't as exciting as previous drafts. Do you get that feel? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because the quarterback class is lackluster and people are forcing quarterbacks into first round conversation. And I'm a little bit skeptical if those are first round players. But when it comes to Cam Ward, I'm certain he's a first round player. I'm certain he's a top 10 player, and he could be a top 10 player in other draft. But like, there really isn't a lot of drama. So at the moment, from a media standpoint, covering the draft, I can see like certain narratives being painted because it's going to draw a lot of clicks. It's going to draw a lot of eyeballs to that narrative. And if it was just, hey, Tennessee's sitting, taking Cam Ward, it's just like that entire like very juicy story just evaporates, right? So how much of like maybe April rolls around, the end of April, and it's just like, yeah, we're going Cam Ward. Duh, we need a quarterback and we like this guy. And then the Giants just, oh, all right. And then it's like we start talking about Shador at 3, or do we trade down, or do we just get one of the blue chips? I can see that also coming true. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Look, we all love to work out. The summer's coming around. You want to look good in your bathing suit. But in order to enhance your workout, you want to go and use MitoPure from Timeline. This is a great product. When I started using it, it makes me feel stronger, gives me more energy. I recover quicker. You know, I'm in my 30s. I still have the energy to work out. And if you want that energy, you really should give Timeline's MitoPure a shot and work it into your routine. This, the great year of 2025, is your year to be the best, most energized, most revitalized you. MitoPure promotes cellular renewal and mitochondrial health to address common signs of aging at the root. MitoPure is the research-backed innovation that unlocks your fullest potential. Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/banter. It's timeline.com/banter. That's TIMELINE.
Yeah, but I like the point you brought up, Nick. It's a great point. Like, why aren't the Titans drafting Cam Ward if he's somebody who should be traded up for with their position? And same thing goes for the Browns. Why aren't we hearing the Browns are interested in trade talks with Titans if he's, you know, that player? And I think that's part of this class. I mean, the reality is it's not as ballyhooed, and I'm not so sure the NFL views these quarterbacks the same way a desperate team like the Giants might. But I think, and I think you think this as well, from what we've seen from Ward, it's enough that in this desperate state that I am also in, I'm willing to take a chance, man. I'm willing to trade those assets as long as we understand the leverage. So for me, it's like, in that trade scenario that was brought up, if you're going to throw Kavon Thibodeaux in there, which I don't love to do personally, for Harold Landry, who's an older player who's already paid and not on a rookie contract. And again, the cap part doesn't kill me, but if you're going to make that trade up to get a quarterback who's now, under contract, rookie contract for cheap, that's a big swing right there. Like, you're giving up somebody who you drafted at 5 overall, who got better last year. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the pressures his pressures per pass rush last year, pass rush productivity, and also in his pass rush win rate, all those numbers improved last year. They were at its best that they've been for Kavon Thibodeaux, despite, again, the Giants not putting that defense in a lot of good positions to rush the passer because they don't move the ball on offense. They don't score on offense. It's trading an asset that I think is maybe on the up. And yes, if you're the Giants, you're looking at it like, if you do trade him, you're saying, we don't really believe in him too much long-term, to be honest, and we don't want to re-sign him. Let's get rid of him before we have to re-sign him. I'm fine with that decision, and Harold Landry may fit your Shane Bowen defense better. He's played with Shane Bowen. It's more of a short-term thinking decision. But if that's the case, Nick, I don't want to give up a second-round pick also. I think then it's got 2 threes, and you give up the asset like Kavon Thibodeaux.
And I can be talked into that. I can.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not like completely out on Kavon. Kavon has been disappointing because he was a top 5 pick. But again, he's a useful player. He's an above average player. Harold Landry is 28 years old right now. We know Shane Bowen and him have gotten along. He's 2 years now, I think, removed from that torn Achilles that he suffered. And he's had a good season since then. He's had 2 relatively respectable seasons since then. So I can certainly be talked into the 2 threes with Kavon for a trade up to 1 to secure Cam Ward. But there's a lot to consider here. And I think you brought up the main point. And that is Tennessee's not going to want to drop out of the top 3. Joe Shane needs to lean on that leverage because this is going to be like a game of chess between the Titans front office and the Giants front office, because the Titans should do what's best for their organization. And that is attempting to get as much as they can from this trade. But the Giants have to realize that Titans are not going to want to trade out with anybody else, more than likely, other than Cleveland. So that factors in, what are the Cleveland Browns going to do? And I think just the top 3 of this draft is so interesting from this standpoint. And we might learn a lot, Dan, once free agency happens, because the Titans go out and they sign Sam Darnold to like a 3-year deal or something like that, or 4 or 5-year deal, whatever, right? That could change things drastically and also alter the entire conversation, and also put something in Joe Shane's mind, maybe a little bit more desperation, maybe a little bit less desperation, depending on what happens. And same with Cleveland. So those are the 2 teams the Giants obviously really need to know what the hell they're doing and how they're evaluating the quarterback position. And also, we got to talk about how do these teams feel about Shedeur? How do the Giants feel about Shedeur Sanders? It seems like he's fallen after the combine, right? Like there's not as much luster around Shedeur Sanders, and there's a lot of negative stories coming out about him. And then you got to factor in, well, is that real or is that like teams putting stuff out there? I'm not sure. I've only watched 1 game of Shedeur. I wasn't overly impressed with him. It doesn't seem like a lot of other evaluators that I trust, who I've listened to, they haven't been overly impressed with what Shedeur Sanders has put on tape, but I will reserve my judgment until I get my eyes on.
Yeah, well, that's the other interesting factor in all this, right, Nick? Because I don't think so. On one hand, it's like, are these rumors coming out as completely false, driven by the Titans to get some other team like the Raiders or something to trade up? I don't really think that's the case, because in my opinion, I'm kind of just listening to what they've said about this draft class. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, well then if it's true, and there's so much smoke, when there's this much smoke, I think it might be true. Like last year, there was this much smoke around the Giants trading up for Drake May. And then we found out after the fact they did try to trade up for Drake May. So it was real. So if there's the same amount of smoke here, one report from Ronan, another from the BBI guys, another from the Titans guy, we're hearing 4, 5 different reports the Giants are going to trade up. And from what Ronan said, that's like what he's hearing throughout the combine, right? Like that's what people who are talking to people are saying. There's conversations going on between the Giants and the Titans. If all that's true, Nick, and as part of that report, like we mentioned, it's to get Cam Ward. Well, what does that say about the Giants' opinion of Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or any of these other quarterbacks who might be in the mix for them at number 3 overall if they just sit there? To me, it says the Giants are not going to use that 3rd pick on Shedeur Sanders, or again, I'll throw Dart and whatever. And let's just say for this Sanders, because I don't really think Dart is in consideration at 3 overall, but he might be. We'll find out. But it tells me the Giants aren't really considering that right now. And they don't maybe view Sanders, because otherwise, why wouldn't they trade up for Shedeur Sanders, right? Or otherwise, why would they even trade up in the first place when they know they're most likely going to have Sanders available to them at number 3 overall?
Might be just a 1 quarterback draft, man, when it comes to like that top guy
Sure.
that you are sure could be a franchise face. The other guys could work out, but it all is a little bit more dependent on what system they land in. Whereas like Cam Ward, it's like, yeah, I think he can fit into a lot of different systems, and then those systems can be tailored around his skill set, right? So
Right.
it seems like that's at least the conversation. Again, I got some more all 22 to watch on Shador himself, but with Cam, I see it, man. Like it's there with Cam Ward on tape when it comes to his ability to create plays, and it's something that I think is, look, it's not going to be as easy to do that at the NFL level, right? It's a lot. They're a lot faster. You're going to need to really adjust your game a little bit, but I can still see like people evoke Mahomes' name, right? He's not Patrick Mahomes. He doesn't have Patrick Mahomes' arm talent, all that, but his ability to create plays behind the line of scrimmage while keeping his eyes down the field and moving the sticks while doing that is very impressive, and it's Mahomes-like.
I completely agree with you. So I've hated the Mahomes comparison throughout this draft because I remembered watching a ton of Mahomes at Texas Tech. He was my guy in that class. I thought he was QB1. Is one I'm not always right on quarterbacks. That one I was right on.
Killed it, yeah.
You watch him though, it was not like no one will ever look his college tape. I don't think will ever personally be replicated with just some of the throws he made down the field. I actually think Mahomes' arm talent has gotten worse somehow. Maybe he's dealing with injuries, whatever. When I watch Mahomes now, I don't see the same quarterback I used to watch on the Chiefs or that Texas Tech version. But I know exactly what you mean when it comes to those plays that are made from Ward on his tape where he's breaking pocket and he finds a way to move the change. How does he do it? How does he find that guy open, right? Well, he does it by changing his arm slot. And like you said, by keeping his eyes downfield. He does a really good job in my mind of keeping his eyes downfield. But what I like about Ward, and we'll get into more Ward on another podcast. This isn't the time for it. But what I like about Ward is he also, to me, shows examples of just like understanding concepts at different levels of the field, using his eye, move defenders. And in my mind, layering throws. I'm not so sure how many of these guys layer throws in this class like he does. Shador does it as well on his tape at times. But as far as that goes with Shador Sanders, like, and versus Cam Ward, and, you know, what would be worth trading up for, what would be worth investing in when it comes to the Giants, like, I'm less concerned about what you mentioned earlier with like the combine stuff coming out with Sanders. I kind of like his confidence as a quarterback, and I don't mind how he answered questions and any of that personally. I think you need to be confident as a quarterback. I also love his toughness on the football field, Shador Sanders. I have less questions about that and more questions about how his skill set translate. But as far as the Giants goes, I can understand why they might be more interested in trading up for Ward than sitting at 3 and taking Sanders, because that could be what it comes down to, Nick. It could ultimately be the Giants have two options if they want one of these quarterbacks in the first round. It could be they either trade up to 1 to get Ward or they have no chance at him, right? Say the Browns are going to definitely take him. They know that. And that means giving up assets, Kavon Thibodeaux, this year's 3, maybe next year's 2 as well, or sit at 3 and get Sanders for free. That may be their option. And I still may be in favor personally of, and I probably will be, of trading up to 1 and giving up all those assets at Cam Ward than Sanders. But the reason they may be, in my mind, Nick, is because they may look at Sanders as someone who can work in the NFL. They've done a lot of work on him. But for him to work, they need to put him in a good situation to start. They need to put him with a stable line so he gets rid of some of those tendencies he created behind a bad O-line at Colorado. And they need to put him in a system of receivers who are good timing route-based receivers. Because I think that's ultimately where he could be a good quarterback in the NFL. Great. I'm still... you know, I kind of want to see with Sanders, more moments of it, but really good quarterback. The Giants may not have the situation for him right now.
You've watched Shador more than I have. How open are you to passing up on a possible blue chip like Hunter or like Abdul Carter for a quarterback like Shador Sanders? Now, we desperately need quarterbacks. And last year, and this could be debated, and I know there's people on Giants Twitter who disagree with us. We went with the receiver over quarterbacks like Penix, like Bo Nix, and like JJ McCarthy. And I can easily, like, that could easily be wrong in the long term, right? Like, certainly I can see how that could have been the wrong decision. As much as I love Malik Neighbors, I still understand where we were with that decision making, but we could be wrong with that. Does choosing Shador Sanders, is he a quarterback like those guys and passing up on a blue chip like a Hunter, say if Hunter's available, is that really wise? Or is that like just purely desperation? How are we going to judge this situation because one of those blue chips will be on the board if Cam Ward was selected and the Giants are still at 3?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you ask, right, Nick? Like, a lot of people believe Shador Sanders belongs in that mix, along with some people have him as QB1 above Cam Ward, right? And so I think when it comes down to Sanders, if it works out the way it could work out, Nick, it will be a lot of because he wasn't able to showcase his skill set as much in his situation at Colorado. personally. With Ward, I see more examples of the wow moments of what we've discussed. With Sanders, to me, it's more of a projection completely when it comes to him, is what it would. Because the things I like about Sanders from what I've seen so far is, one, his repeatable throwing motion. That's going to lead to accuracy at the NFL level. And two, it's his toughness as a quarterback. And I'll throw some other things I like about him. I think he throws well on the run. That's something that's not talked about a lot with Sanders. I think he throws very well on the run. Now, as far as the other stuff, the anticipation, I don't personally see that the way others see it. People say that he is a great anticipatory quarterback at Colorado, or that he will be, or is. I don't see those moments personally as much as others do. I see more with Cam Ward, to be completely honest, as far as what I look for in anticipation. And a lot of it is what we broke down when we broke down Drake May last year. That's the real version of anticipation. As far as how does it translate to the NFL level, I also see a lot of, less so, what's the best way to describe this with Sanders? Throws that I'm not so sure will work at the NFL level, right?
Okay.
Like, he throws it up there. Hunter makes a big play on the ball. Is that ball going to work against an NFL DB? I don't know. And at times you even see it don't work at the college level. The Kansas game, where he has that wide open receiver the play we discussed, and the DB breaks on the football. And then when it comes to, like, will it translate, will it not with Sanders? He's going to have to break a lot of those habits that he's created for himself as far as in the pocket goes, because he's played behind such a bad O-line, drifting, things that, any coach is going to want to be like, we got to get this out of your game. So then if you're the Giants and you're looking at that, you're like, how long does it take for him to be ready for us to put on a football field?
Yeah, and that's where it's like, if the Giants sign Rodgers, is that their course of action? Go at 3, take Shedeur Sanders. And will that rub not just Rodgers, but Russell Wilson the wrong way? Like, I don't know if it would. Like,
right.
Don't you want to build the team to its best? And we're passing on a Hunter who could help both sides of the line of scrimmage, if that's what ends up happening. The Browns went with someone like Abdul Carter, right? So there's a lot to factor in with this, and I still got to watch Shedeur to really solidify my opinions on that. But to get back to the meat and potatoes of this podcast, Giants trading up, like, yeah, I can certainly be talked into that with Cam Ward. I think he is at least in the conversation where this could be a franchise guy who can lead you if everything is right around him, and he develops the right way. Again, trajectory development is not always linear, doesn't always go upward, but if he takes the coaching and all that, and I think he has enough traits that you can bank on that, and it's worth the resources the Giants need to expend to trade up to go get him.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I think there are some parts of his game that I like better than any of the prospects in last year's class, personally, when it comes to, one, the different arm angles he can throw from and what that allows him to do around the line of scrimmage, and then two, the touch and trajectory he puts in his red zone. I think he's a weapon as a red zone thrower immediately when he gets to the NFL, and I like a lot of what I see over Jaden Drake and Caleb Williams.
Was it the Louisville game where he had the one that was just thrown beautifully right in front, and the receiver just plucked it out of the air like that? And then there was the other one where it was just a flat route from like a tight end, and he put it right on that outside shoulder and allowed the tight end just to go right by the pylon. And you're right, man. He has good touch in all levels of the field, really. That's what we look for, right? We want a quarterback who can challenge all levels of the field.
I don't love his vertical as much as others do. I don't know where you put that.
So the Georgia Tech and the Louisville game, I don't have my notes in front of me. He was a little bit more erratic than I wanted to see in those games. And I was trying to, just on the vertical, especially earlier in the game, he always bounced back, though. That's another thing I love about Cam Ward, is the resilience that Cam Ward shows. Again, I don't want to dive too much into these evaluation, but I've seen him throw like some boneheaded interceptions because he's pretty reckless with the football sometimes. And then he'll just bounce back and he'll make the throw you need to, or he processes something so quickly. It's like the safety drops down right at the snap. He knows that he's going to hit that backside slant because he knows that there's a voided area there right now. And that's because he understands space so well, and he understands defensive movement post snap. So it's little things like that I see in his game where I'm like, yeah, I certainly can sign off on that. And you see it a decent amount on his tape. So there's a grit to him that I respect.
I love how you describe that, because when you think about how does a layered throw happen, it's because a quarterback understands the space and where he's going to be able to throw that ball into. I wish I saw more of what you just broke down in Sanders. I hope that when you watch him, you do. I think a lot of it is projection on that front. There are moments of it for sure. He has tons of moments of it, but for Ward, it just feels more innate. That's what it really comes down to. It feels like it's more natural, as you just kind of broke down, which I love. I love that natural ability to understand and process space when it comes to Cam Ward. So with that in mind, he's definitely someone I'm interested in trading up for if that's the case and if the compensation is right. And I think if it ultimately if it comes down to Nick us losing Kavon Thibodeaux in this trade, I can swallow that pill because yeah, we used the top pick on him and yeah, he's improving as a player, but ultimately, are the Giants going to re-sign him to a contract? And if the answer to that is no, then it's not a bad idea to move on before that decision comes.
Such an indictment on Joe Shane's 2022 draft class. Oh my God, dude. Part ways with your top 5 pick, the 7th pick, can't even find the freaking football field.
That could go down as the worst draft class in the history of the Giants when you factor in what you need to, which is the context because of the capital they had. When you have 5 and 7 overall in a class, I can imagine the Giants. I mean, I'd have to look back through their history, but in my lifetime, they haven't had more draft capital. The Dave Gettleman year where they had 6 and 21 was that no 17,
17 and 30. Yeah,
breaking up for the other one. And really had, but that you could argue is close, but it's not on the pick trade compensation. You know, like the Jimmy Johnson chart, 5 and 7 is worth way more than 6 and 17. So that's like, it will go down, in my opinion, if Neal and Thibodeaux, if Thibodeaux gets traded and Neal continues to suck and look, you're not getting anything as Zudu really, right? And Flott is developing. I'm kind of okay on that. Wandell, whatever. We'll see what happens there if we can get a quarterback at any point.
Michael McFadden might be the best draft pick from that class.
I would still say Wandell has been the best, but he just has no quarterback.
Yeah, no, but when you factor, no, I agree, and I like Wandell. This is not a slight on Wandell. Yeah. Wandell was a 2nd round pick. Michael McFadden was a 5th round. So, I mean, that's a value, and it really depends on how you want to quantify best. But like McFadden could be like, I think you could at least make an argument that McFadden continues to develop like he has over the last 2 years, that he might be the best player from that draft class.
You might be right, and we might. He's
not a good thing.
Might just be the best player from that class.
Oh God, dude, that's insane. No, I still think it's probably Kavon. But it's you know it's not great with everything considered.
Yeah, but again, if that's the price it takes to move up, that might be something that we're willing to do. Cam Ward would be a lot of fun to evaluate for us. He'd be a lot of fun for the Giants. I think there'd be some warts, but there's enough plays I could see coming.
And I don't think this is discussed enough about Cam Ward. He had success at 3 different colleges.
Right.
That's difficult, man. That is a difficult task. He was at Incarnate Ward, and then he went to Washington State, and then he goes to Miami, and he leads them to like a 9-1 record. And even the Georgia Tech game, yeah, he fumbled at the end, but he still had like just insane. And I don't even think he was great in that game. Like he had a lot of misses, especially early in that game, as I said before. But he still like battled back and made just insane throws as well. And like showed you like, hey, I can put the team on my back and we can win, even though they ended up losing that game ultimately. But yeah, man, like
that's a program that never won anything. But the same can be said about Sanders. He did the same thing with Jackson State and then with
College. Yeah, and you got to give him credit for that. Absolutely.
And there are
but with Jackson State though, he was with his dad the entire time though.
Yeah.
Like Ward is going to different coaching staffs. Like there's something to be said about different coaching staffs, different buildings, different teammates. He has to galvanize a locker room 3 different times as the quarterback. Like there are some traits that he more than likely has from a leadership standpoint that we can't see from the outside, that when you look at his past in college, you can glean and be like, yeah, similar to JJ last year, similar to JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy now he was jumping around a lot, but JJ McCarthy was a winner where he was in high school, like an insane winner, right? Like he won the state championship, well respected. And then he goes to Michigan. He wins the starting job from a battle that he had with, I can't remember, was it McNamara, the kid who ended up going to Iowa? He ends up winning that starting job, and then he leads them to a national championship, and they win the national championship. Like there are just leadership traits there that you can't quantify. Like we can't see them. They're not tangible, but like when you just look at where they've been and what they've done, you can probably just say, hey, I can understand from the outside why people in that locker room respect this dude.
That's a good point. That is a really fair point. And I want to make one thing clear before we get out of here. I don't want this to be a podcast where it sounds like I'm totally down and out on Shedeur Sanders. As I've watched it, and I'm curious if you'll get this as well. You start to I don't want to say talk yourself into, but you can start to see more of what could work at the NFL level and what could be good if it works. There are some things that I can see it. I get it, Nick. And I think he has the arm talent to make all the throws, as we said about Jones and people like that, though it's not by any means special arm talent. It's not Cam Warren's arm talent whatsoever. He makes good throws on the run, though, way better than Jones ever did, in my opinion. And it will come down to like how, because he's got the toughness, right? He's a better athlete than people realize. He's not a great athlete. He's fine from that standpoint. He's got the toughness to stay in the pocket and make the throws. To me, it comes down to, with Sanders at least, how good can his anticipation be? Because that will be what defines him. If he becomes a quarterback that's top 10, and that's what you want if you're drafting a 3 overall, he has to be an elite anticipatory thrower. That I don't see enough. I don't really understand where that comes from on the tape. That what I'm curious to get if you see it differently than me. And that's what I've discussed with people who like him that I have a lot of respect for on Giants Twitter and whoever, just, scouts and other people that I talk to and people I work with. Like that part of it, is it projection that you see, or give me the film where you're seeing these high level moments of anticipation?
Yeah. And I can't wait to weigh in on that. And just, I don't want to speak for you, Dan, but also to the audience, like Dan is evaluating Sanders right now as a top 3 pick in the NFL draft.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like people, oh, you hate him. It's like, no, he's making a decision based on top 3 selection. Is he worth that relative to what else is on the board? Right. Like that's a much different conversation. If we're talking about Cam Ward at 34, or Shedeur Sanders at 34, it's a completely different thing. Dan would love that. Right. So, So like, just like there are people who might not, who may come at you. It's like, dude, I'm talking about spending a top 5 pick on this guy. But is he worth that?
Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter for them. You're exactly. That you get a chance at that, you don't take that, and instead you get Sanders. That's what the evaluation comes down to. And again, I want to watch more of Sanders too, and I want to try to understand things better. There are things he does very well, but the one thing is anticipation. That one I want to get here. And then the completion percentage, when people bring that up to me, it's like, if you watch the tape, you see a lot of throws around the line of scrimmage, and it is what it is. But like, if you're going to tell me 72% completion rate versus 65% when somebody's just throwing a lot around the line of scrimmage, it's like, I'm going to use the context of what I watch and not really be like, this guy broke the record for completion percentage, when it's like, are we looking at the same kind of offense like that we're going to get in the NFL? Because you're not just going to be able to throw bubbles at the NFL level. Like some of these plays, like I watched Nebraska maybe, and they were down in that game and they came back, or maybe it was Kansas, and they were down a lot. And then he just threw a bubble to the outside. And I think it might not have been Hunter, it might have been number 4, just kind of housed it for 58 because like the blocking didn't catch up. They didn't have enough defenders on the perimeter and it just got blocked up for a second. And that's a 58-yard touchdown and a completion, but it's like, that will never happen at the NFL level.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, if you look at like Jackson Dart, he had like 11.9 average depth of target. Yeah. His yards per attempt was 10.7. Cam Ward isn't too far off that. I think Cam Ward's yards per attempt was like 9.7. I'm curious to see where exactly Shedeur Sanders is with that, because the one game I did watch, which was Kansas, I did see a lot of those passes around the line of scrimmage. So I'm pulling up the stats right now as I just talk. Yeah, it's his was 8.6 yards per attempt, and his A.DOT was 8.1. So it's a little bit less, but you're right. There were a lot of manufactured touches for some of those skilled players in Colorado, which again is fine. It's part of the offense. Yes.
Yeah, you should do that if you have Hunter and those dudes around. Like the strength of that team, if you're Shermer, is, wow, I have these dudes on the outside. Let me get them the ball.
Isn't it funny that Shermer is still like in the conversation for Giants fans?
Yeah,
like Shermer is just always around, dude. We just like, he's one of those coaches who was only there briefly. He was only a Giants coach for 2 years, but for whatever, like it's just like, oh yeah, Pat Shermer, and then like he finds his way back into the Giants conversation somehow. Oh, yeah, he's the OC,
guy that coach that according to the next Giants quarterback, because they still may take Shedeur at 3, or this might be all smoke. They might be trading up to 1 for Shedeur. That's possible too.
Yeah, it could be.
We don't know. But right now it's crazy in Giants land. We got rumors about them potentially signing Rodgers, trading up to number 1 overall, where they say it would be for Cam Ward. Who knows what's going to happen, Nick? There's a lot that's going to go down between now and Monday, and about, we've got 6 days before we start to really hear shit when the legal tampering period opens. So hopefully the Giants are involved in it the way we want them to be involved. But this is where we stand right now on Big Blue Banter. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully by the end of this week, when I'm looking to record again, or in maybe even sooner, in a day or 2, I can get a computer going, so you don't have to look at this ridiculous mess back here that the construction people have left. But anyway, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.